Welcome back to the Vertical 10 podcast. We have with us today a very special guest, Mr. Robert Reeves. Mr. Reeves is a member of the National Trial Lawyers Organization Top 100, South Carolina's Super Lawyers. We are very honored to have this guest with us today. Thank you for coming, Robert. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Very kind.
Perfect. So, with our audience and what our audience looks at, and we'd like to highlight firms across the country, coast to coast, and we're very grateful that you were able to jump on with us for a few minutes today. And what we'd like to highlight is we'd like to get a little bit more information, a little bit more knowledge about your story. And what we would like to talk about initially is what first motivated you to become a lawyer, and then how did you get started in your legal career?
Well, lawyering was very attractive because it was certainly in vogue back in the 70s. And I did it for money. Nothing more shallow than that, but that was a driving force. Um, I started out as a insurance defense lawyer after law school, and I did that for about 7 years, and I enjoyed that. But unfortunately, I saw where I won a lot of cases that I probably shouldn't have, except the plaintiff's lawyer was not prepared um, or was not willing to go the distance, i.e., go to trial. So I thought there was a better market on the other side because plaintiff's lawyers, even if you're not particularly talented, can make great deal of money if they advertise well. The biggest plaintiff's lawyers rarely go to trial, so they have a kind of a mill firm mentality, which I have absolutely avoided in my own practice. We are not a large firm by design. Actually, my mobile phone number on our website. I can only do that because we are very particular about what cases we take. Now, the practice has evolved over the decades. So I did workers' comp exclusively for, let's see, 1996 to 2006, so about 10 years. And then, of course, if you do strictly personal injury or uh, it, so it, and we like to go to trial if necessary. And certainly in criminal practice, we're very choosy on what we take. So we principally focused on DUI cases because there was a good market for that. And you do go to trial a lot, which I feel like kept my trial skills sharp. And you have to be taken credibly by insurance adjusters and prosecutors if you're going to get good results on it. Then we added family law about 10 years ago, just because, again, I thought it was a very good market for that. Um, and the goal is basically to get folks divorced, not run a lot of unnecessary legal fees. So it's a very good practice, and all three are lucrative. I'd say personal injury is starting to decline, thankfully, due to improvements in auto safety systems. And of course, if cars go autonomous within our lifetime, well, that will be the end of that. And DUI, which are all good things. Family law, unfortunately, 50% of the adult population just can't get involved. Uh, Try to take a simplistic approach to family law because it truly is. Divorce is simply a business uh, type environment where you're trying to disentangle yourself from that relationship. The only thing that makes it difficult is human personalities and anxiety. So we try to keep it as rational as we can. Excuse me, and get from A to A to B. And so it's a very enjoyable, rounded practice. Since COVID, we've learned the ability to work remotely and do. So two lawyers that kind enough to work with me, they both work from home. I work from home as well. I go to court for mediations when the case requires it. Otherwise, I'm on the phone and on the computer writing emails, and it's just a wonderful way to practice law. What else, my
So
friend?
so let's talk about and so, we've got the three areas: PI, family, and criminal. So what would you say? Let's start with PI, and let's go and let's drill down a little bit further. And for a motor vehicle accident, what type of advice, what type of guidance would you give, um, you know, potential new clients who were just, rear-ended, they were not at fault. Can you kind of walk us through the steps of what like an ideal client would do to have the best case presented with your firm?
Well, I get a lot of calls that are soft tissue cases. Um, Liability is clear, injuries are minimal, thank goodness. I tell those folks that in all fairness, you truly don't need a lawyer. That case has a certain value, and you're going to get that whether you choose to hire a lawyer and give away a third of your settlement or not. Most of the TV and billboard lawyers, they help folks who either don't want to deal with it or really are just intimidated by the process. But you get the treatment that you need. Um, and that means you go to the emergency room. They usually refer you to your family doctor. A lot of folks go to chiropractors for soft tissue care, which I think chiropractic care is more holistic than physical therapy. But strangely, juries, insurance companies disregard chiropractic care or greatly discount it. They take physical therapy at full value. I think it's just because in years past, present, a lot of bill firms, they have their send you to, then you get some bills. It's called to appreciate. But for soft tissue cases, if you just don't want to be inconvenienced or if you're intimidated, then you should hire a lawyer. I would try to negotiate with the lawyer up front. Our firm charges a 25% fee on our cases. Not that I think less of my service or ability, but I think that's more fair. If we have to file a lawsuit, then we go back to the more traditional one third. Now, what differentiates a case where you may or may not need a lawyer from one where you clearly do is where you have serious injury. And I define serious injury as being where you break a bone and or need some sort of surgical repair. Certainly, for most serious cases, wrongful death cases, I think you do need a lawyer. Our biggest concern in serious injury cases is always insurance coverage. A lot of folks are out driving. Most folks are out driving minimal limits, which you can easily burn through. You're just taken into a trauma center. One
Right.
day of care there can easily burn through minimal limits. So I always encourage everybody before you need it, make sure you have plenty of underinsured coverage. And I would suggest at a minimum under 300. I would suggest even higher. Cases we like to deal with medical bills are several $100,000. And unfortunately, a lot of times there's just not enough coverage for that. So be sure to check with your agent and make sure you have plenty of uninsured. Because there's folks out there driving without insurance, even though it's illegal. And almost everyone has minimal limits. So you absolutely need as much underinsured coverage as you can get. All right. What else?
So take us through what happens when, let's say, someone has state minimum coverage. They're at fault. They run into you. There's potential. Let's say there's broken bones, for example. So there's broken bones, and it goes through and it's exhausted the insurance coverage by the individual who was responsible for the accident. So take us through like a scenario where what your firm does to help your client get the recovery that they deserve.
Well, in those cases, they're not going to get the recovery they deserve. There's just not enough coverage. So we earn our fee first by securing as much coverage as possible and exhausting those limits. And then we earn our fee coming back down by dealing with medical liens. So we've had cases that were really bad. It's usually a motorcycle accident. Um, we had a gentleman who his medicals were $350,000. the person who caused the accident had 25,000 minimum limits, and he had no underinsured on his motorcycle. Um, so we wiped out all of his medical liens, so he didn't owe any money. Um, got a few $1,000s, but did he get what he deserved? Nope, of course not. But that's where, again, you've got to be proactive and get as much underinsured coverage as you can. Now, on bigger cases where there's a commercial policy, and by the way, certainly, anytime we have a minimum limits case, we do an asset check to make sure the individual caused the accident with minimal limits, maybe somebody we would sue outside of coverage. In other words, we would reject the minimal limits and just sue the individual. But that's a very rare circumstance, because it's very difficult to collect against an individual unless they have lots of assets like commercial properties and things like that we can seize upon. I'm always reminded of the O.J. Simpson civil verdict. Um, that has still not been fully collected, 20 plus years later, maybe 30 years later.
Right.
So, if you don't have enough coverage, then we do the very best to protect you from medical liens. Uh, but you're not going to get what you deserve. There's not sufficient coverage. Commercial policies, you have to have at least 750,000 to drive a commercial vehicle on the roads. Most companies have 1 million or even more. In those circumstances, we're going to be able to negotiate less on the liens, but we have plenty of coverage to get closer to what you deserve. So commercial policies, those are always the ones that we feel like we can do the most good.
Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So let's switch gears a little bit to the second area of expertise in your firm on the criminal side. And you said that you're primarily only handling the larger scale cases, the larger felonies right now. Is that correct?
Well, what we do is this, DUIs fortunately are going down. Um, I mean, we made so much money back in the DUI days when Uber started becoming more prevalent. I wish they would put DUI lawyers out of business, but they certainly have had an impact, and I'm grateful because I drive on these roads too. We also have edged into some other uh, cases, more felonies, um, but people have to have skin in the game. So it's not a contingency fee, and our fees are thousands of dollars in most cases. So a lot of folks put it on credit cards or borrow money from friends or family. But, in a civil case, we're talking about money. In a criminal case, it's much more serious than money because you're talking potentially about your freedom. Now, what I do like about criminal is I don't have to prove anything and don't have to solve the riddle. And I basically look at the state's evidence to see if they've done their job. And even though I'm pretty conservative in my outlook, I want to hold the state to the same standard that I'd want to be held to if I were charged with a crime. So, 99% of my cases, the client is absolutely guilty. But there's a great billboard somewhere out west that says, just because you did it doesn't mean you're guilty. And I like that because, again, we have the best criminal justice system, I think, in the world. Um, it it protects us from the state, which has virtually unlimited resources, and they set all the rules. We play by the rules that they set. So I always emphasize to the jury that one of the rules the state says we are mandated to follow is make them prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt on every aspect. And I say simply follow the rules that they set. And I think that's very important because if you get caught up in the criminal justice system, you definitely are at a huge disadvantage. So you want to hire the best lawyer that you can afford because I do think that makes a difference, no question about it.
Yeah, without question. And so let's piggyback just for a second on DUI, for example. So one of the most popular things we see out there, and you see it on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, is where you see attorneys, offering some guidance on what to do if you're pulled over. So let's throw it out there. A, don't drink and drive ever, period, under any circumstances. But if you're pulled over and you're suspected of that, um, what type of guidance could you give to our audience that would provide them with the best protection under the law before the next steps potentially happened and they would have to retain an attorney? What's your
Well,
suggestion?
the old rule of the 2 drink rule, which I used for many, many years, just doesn't apply anymore. Um, Juries have pretty much gone to an almost zero tolerance policy. So in North Carolina, when I would pick juries, it's more conversational. I'd always start by asking how many believe it's illegal to drink and drive. And they all raise their hands, unanimous. I said, okay, just like what my mother used to say. I don't know how many people have heard of the so-called legal limit of .08. They all raise their hands. So then I say, well, if that's the case, how many now believe that it's okay to drink and drive as long as your blood alcohol doesn't reach .08 or higher? And I get just a state of confusion. So the first rule is this: I love to drink. I just drink at home. My wife says it's because I'm cheap. I say we're both right. If you have any scent of alcohol on your breath and you're stopped for any reason, you're going to spend the night in jail. And here's why. First, they'll ask you to keep in mind every part of a DUI case, at least in South Carolina, is going to be video recorded. All right. So everything you do and say is going to be preserved for posterity. So be absolutely polite and respectful. Law enforcement is there to do a job. And if you give them attitude, then that's just going to make you look badly. And juries, for the most part, are pretty conservative and pro law and order, as we should be. Um, and so if you show out, then the jury's just not going to like you. Guess what? That makes a big difference. So if you get stopped, first turn on the light. I assume it's at night. Turn on the light, put your hands on the steering wheel, and put your window down because we want the officer or trooper as calm as possible. It's very anxiety producing and frankly dangerous when they approach a car. So you take the anxiety away, put your hands on the wheel, put your window down, turn your lights on so they can see everything inside. When they ask you to step out of the car, step out. Um, you walk to the back of the car. When the officer says, I want to do some field sobriety test, you can just say, well, Your Honor, officer, I've heard that sometimes doesn't go well, and there's certainly a margin of error. So I'm going to respectfully decline. And they'll say, well, there are consequences for that. I understand. And then, of course, North Carolina has roadside breath testing. South Carolina currently does not. But you politely decline everything, politely and respectfully decline everything. When you get back to the station and they want you to give a breath sample, again, in South Carolina, you still have the right to refuse. Again, do so politely and respectfully. Some states like North Carolina now, they've essentially removed the right to refuse because in North Carolina, if you exercise that constitutional right the officer just told you about, then they can get a warrant signed by a judge and forcibly take your blood. So in North Carolina, and I don't know about other states, your right to refuse is somewhat muted by that. But as long as you have the right to politely and respectfully decline, you should. That way, the state is left with really perhaps bad driving seen on video. Perhaps you are stumbling as you get out of the car. And certainly and they'll always say strong odor of alcohol on or about the person. So less is more. But if you truly want to avoid it, drink at home. So when my wife and I go out, she'll get some wonderful drink, very expensive. And she'll say, oh, you got to try this. And I say, you vixen. No, I can't have the scent of alcohol in my breath. But that's the best way to deal with DUI. First, don't do it.
Right.
That's the one thing I do agree with Matt on, although I think some of their positions are getting a bit extreme. I know they want to put ignition interlock into every vehicle. And unfortunately that technology, is not the best. It has a lot of errors, and frankly, it just doesn't work as well as I think it should. Plus, a breath test, keep in mind, is just some sort of computer algorithm converting breath to some type of blood result, but there's no blood involved, and there's certainly a margin of error with breath testing. What else, my friend?
So if we're there'll be individuals who may be in Virginia, there may be in Maryland, they may be in, Kentucky. So
Sure.
this is nationwide. So, and I know each state is different, but um is there still where you're seeing if you refuse a breathalyzer, a lot of states have it where you automatically lose your driver's license for a year,
Sure.
whether you're found guilty or not. except for maybe like a hardship license. Is that a situation that you see coming across, or is that not
So
relevant to the Carolinas?
I think it's universal. I think every state has that because you've got two aspects of a DUI. One is the criminal case, obviously, and the other is the civil side, the DMV side. Um, license being licensed is a privilege, not a right. It can be taken away for any number of reasons, and that's one of them. But in all fairness, I'm more concerned about winning the war instead of the battle. So even if your license is suspended, South Carolina it's 6 months, North Carolina it's 1 year. Um, you typically are eligible for some type of route restricted or to and from work kind of a thing. But I'm more concerned about the criminal aspect because South Carolina, for example, if you're convicted of a DUI, you have to have 3 years of special risk insurance. But let's be candid. If you're convicted of a DUI in any state, no insurance company that you've heard of is really going to want to insure you. So you're left with, something out of the Philippines, maybe. But
Right.
so I'd rather lose the battle and win the war.
Okay. Perfect, perfect. Yeah, and we definitely appreciate that insight because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and people go on the internet and they look at blog sites and stuff like that, and again, so having a highly experienced seasoned attorney across all the spectrums really does help it, and we do appreciate that guidance. The last area on the spectrum is family law, and you were mentioning before, 50% of the country can't get along. Um, so from your experience and your firm's experience, what would you say would probably be the top two reasons why couples file for divorce? It clear most of the time it doesn't go well. So if it's contested versus uncontested, um, could you elaborate a little bit on that? Why, you know, in your experience, you're seeing 50% of these marriages dissolve?
Well, at least in the '80s, adultery was pretty prevalent. I didn't do family law back then, but that seemed to be the societal norm. These days, I think couples just grow in different directions. Um, and we're seeing a lot of older couples. The kids, they get through the kids growing up, and when the kids move out to go away, college or start their lives, they learn that they've really just grown apart. Now, no matter how much money you spend, you're going to end up exactly the same, divorced. So I actually wrote an ebook because it just seems so incredibly simple to me, and I've been divorced twice. Something about not listening. Haha. um, but you gather up the firm, or excuse me, the family assets, the marital assets, and the marital debts, and you split it. Um, as far as the children go, I think the children are collateral damage, and you definitely want to have both of the parents engaged in their children's lives if they're engaging parents. I have some parents who were absentee fathers or mothers with two income families, and that doesn't change. But I think everything down the middle is the most fair. If I have a high wage earner who made all the money and the spouse, gender neutral, stayed at home and raised the kids, they said, "Well, I don't know why I have to give a path." And I said, "Well, because it took both of you to make this money. Somebody had to stay home and raise the children, which is invaluable, and they did a great job. And somebody else was out, progressing in their career. So you made it together, and therefore you share it together. Ironically, it takes two to make a marriage, and it takes two to make a successful divorce. But I always tell folks, if you're a childless couple and you're divorcing, fine. You can divorce and never look back. Um, but if you have children, you're going to have some type of relationship, hopefully a cordial relationship, um, because you're going to have all the events in your children's lives, graduations, weddings, any number of things. Um, but I also tell folks that, again, if you keep this in the proper perspective, divorce is not meant to be revenge. It is meant to basically disentangle you and treat it like a business situation. And money and emotion should never, ever occupy the same room. And my clients who spend a lot of money, I always tell them, they say, "Well, how expensive is this going to be?" I said, "Well, I have no idea. Oh, that's up to you two. I have zero control and you only have 50%. But I will tell you at every step of the way, I always encourage you to act like grown-ups because that saves you stress and strife and legal fees. And you can talk to your spouse for free. Even if it's not a constructive conversation, at least it's free. If you call me to talk to their lawyer, then you as a couple are spending a lot of money that you two could do this on your own if you'll just grow up. If they have children, obviously there were some happy times. Try to keep that in mind. Try to keep that in mind. Save your money.
Perfect. Yeah, no, perfect. So so then now looking at, you personally with your firm, and this is kinda this question's kinda tailored to, a lot of attorneys who are just starting out, and with our firm at Vertical 10, we are a marketing agency, and so, we do have a reach to, especially a lot of newer solo attorneys and attorneys who are, still young in the profession. What kind of guidance would you be able to give to those new attorneys who are just starting out, in terms of um, like their work life balance, their um, you know, how they're not, living, breathing 24/7 in their career so that they still have the opportunity to have a, let's use the air quotes, like normal life outside of their practice. With your wealth of experience, what type of guidance would you give to those new attorneys, that are just starting their own practice, and they're just getting, they're just getting their firm and their career off on the right foot?
Well, first and foremost, remember that this is a profession, but it's you keep it in the context in that this is your job. You should define yourself by who you are, not by what you do. So too many lawyers, and I'm guilty of it. I'm 62. I practiced almost 35 years. I don't have any intention of retiring just yet. Because again, I'm not working 40 hours or 50 hours a week. Um, First thing I would do is choose a practice area that you have a good chance to be successful at. For example, now AI is going to take care and is already taking care of a lot of the business matters, document review, contract drafting. I think it's going to affect other areas as well, including divorce. But if you pitch yourself as a personal injury lawyer, you've entered just a cage fight, and you're just not going to do well as an individual. The advertising costs are just extreme, and you've got too many other large firms that are you're going to be picking up the crumbs that nobody else wants. So everybody wants to be a PI lawyer, wants the big case. I get that, and when I settle a big case, I'm excited too. But guess what? They're relatively few and far between. So now criminal is a wonderful practice area. There's a tremendous need. I would start out by either developing your resume and working as a prosecutor or a public defender. But I think being a former prosecutor is a huge advantage marketing wise. Public defenders, unfortunately, have a terrible public reputation that I do not think it's deserved. I think public defenders are very fine lawyers. They just have way too many cases. So they do not have the ability to return calls or emails. And so they get the worst reputation. Being a former prosecutor, like the lawyer that works with me, his name is Zach Fry. He is phenomenal. And I think that's a tremendous advantage. If you don't want to work as a prosecutor or a public defender and you just want to go ahead and start your own firm, then definitely focus on something. Criminal as a typical measure. You don't want the case for somebody's charged with robbery because they probably don't have any money. It's why they're robbing in the first place. So something like DUI has been very lucrative in the past. I think the trend is down. Criminal domestic violence, that we see a lot of that. Now, if you're truly beating your spouse, gender neutral, I don't want to represent you. But we get a lot of folks who get falsely accused. And what I mean by that is you're arguing with your spouse, gets loud, somebody calls the police, and suddenly you're in the backseat in handcuffs. Um, if a child's involved, it goes to a higher degree. But criminal domestic violence is a good option. Sex crimes. It's hard to advertise for that because anything you put on Google, they immediately delete. But sex crimes, a lot of folks again, we see a lot of false accusations. Um, but people will pay for that because that is a very serious area. And even if you win the criminal case or negotiate the criminal case, a lot of times they'll want you on a sex registry, which is devastating to an individual. So very important area of practice. Now, the best thing, and you probably know this being in a marketing company, is you definitely want to get yourself on Google Maps because we're all lazy. And, the Google AdWords, again, that can be very expensive, but if you get on Google Maps, um, that's very important. And currently it's free. We'll see if Google changes that, but currently it's free. And the best way that I've learned to be on Google Maps is first you fill out and complete the entire Google Maps profile. Um, and the other little trick I learned from an individual is you take your phone, you put it on location, and you take photos of your office or wherever in areas, so that when you upload those photos to Google Maps, you have that geo tag, which
Right.
is pretty cool. You knew that. I learned that very recently. So the other thing is you've got to keep your overhead down. It is hard to make money when you're spending all of your time and energy on overhead. So the old days of having your own office, I think, are kind of passe. Um, uh, Here in Anderson, where I live, I have a room, and it was a converted home. I pay $600 a month because I pay it annually, and that's really all I need. Is I need an address that's identified by Google as being inside Anderson. So I'm a lawyer inside Anderson, back in Fort Mill. Years ago, 20 years ago, the idea was you bought office space. So that there's an easier way to do that now. The other big advantage, if you're going to be successful, is a shockingly low bar. But if you just, for God's sakes, return phone calls and respond to emails, that's the number one complaint against lawyers. And maybe it goes further, but I get so many calls on weekends and evenings that I'm happy to take because I advertise my mobile number, and it goes straight to me. And so I'd say we probably take 1 in 10, maybe 1 in 15 calls. But guess what? Um, the calls that I tell them they don't need me. Okay. And here's why. And I guide them. I'll say, I'm happy to help you. Would you consider doing a Google Internet review? My mama can't write them all. They'll write a review quicker than a long-term client, because they appreciate you giving something of value to them for free. And reviews are certainly the most important thing. And I'm sure it is with Bing as well. Bing's kind of the silver to gold. Um, there was some hope in the chat bot, maybe Bing would be a higher stature, but currently Google is still the overwhelming standard. So a Yelp review doesn't help me at all. I'm not a restaurant. Um, Justia review or some of these others, Avo, none of that helps me. It's always Google. And I used to pay a service for that. But I quickly figured out, guess what? You don't need to. Most folks know how to do it. So if they don't, I just tell them, just type in Robert J. Reeves, PC, Fort Mill, and the Google box will pop up to the right. And any kind words would be greatly appreciated. Also, respond to those reviews and thank them for it, because again, Google likes to see that. And if you get, I have 1 or 2 1-star reviews. Well, so what? That's just the American public. If they're all 5-star reviews, you probably bought them in China. Okay. If you
Right.
don't have a negative review, then you ain't dealing fairly. So
Right.
one of the 1 stars was the other side in the family law case, and she was bashing the family lawyer that I work with and said he screwed her over. I'm going, well, that's a 5-star. So
Right.
um, but if you get a negative review, you need to respond to it, and you have to type what you would never want to say. Okay, you'd like to tell these people, well, you know what, you're a malcontent and you're a miserable person. But what you have to say is, well, I'm sorry that you were not satisfied or completely satisfied. We'll certainly take this experience and learn from it. We wish you the very best. So you have to go above the fray. You have to remain the grown up in the room, because again, You are going to get a negative review on occasion because that's just the nature of the American public. Whatever retail you're in, law is retail. If you deal with the American public, you're gonna find a malcontent at some point and deal with it professionally. And then I think you turn a negative into at least a neutral.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely, and I'm glad you brought up, that topic because so now does your firm, and again, we at Vertical 10, we do digital marketing, but so does your firm do any type of digital marketing, or is it primarily just referrals and word of mouth? And the second part of that question is, if you are doing it, do you have, a platform of digital marketing that you would recommend to the newer attorneys who are they don't have the network of individuals like yourself and like, your associates where they're, like I said, they're just starting out. So, um, one, are you doing any type of digital marketing to drive, quality cases to your firm? And if you are, what would you recommend to the newer attorneys starting out?
Certainly. Uh, we're we've developed our website's 20 something years old. So we have certainly used things like Google AdWords. Um, I found it to be very expensive. It clearly works. Your phone rings. And if I could prevent vendors from calling me, that
Right.
would, and wasting my dollars, that would be awesome. But I think that yes, you absolutely have to have a digital presence until you reach a point where your site is organically on page one. To get a site on page one, as you know, you're going to have to add content. Um, Now, when I was, earlier on, I wrote all the content, all the blog posts, and I spent a lot of time doing that. And then I was able to start hiring writers. Now, I used to hire law students, and they write very well. Unfortunately, it's not the way Google likes. They write like lawyers, boring.
Right.
So I started hiring content folks who were um, uh, creative writing majors. Those are the best, and they write the way Google likes, and they would write for $30 an article, and then we would SEO it and then post it on our sites. So regular content is very, very important. I do think lawyers should write their own content for the the substantive law. Leave the subjective writing for the creative writers. But for the substantive law, I think lawyers should write that for a couple of reasons. First, it will demonstrate that you have knowledge in the area, and also it puts your particular, spin or flair on it. They get an idea of, how you approach cases. Okay, and I think if it's too much, what I call them pitch phrases, all the lame stuff,
Right.
trying to get you to call, for example. And then again, that we did a lot of videos back during COVID. And guess what? We figured out you can make great videos on your phone. We have a YouTube channel. Um, and told my wife, I said, when COVID hit, I said, it looks like I'm going to be here a whole lot more. So if I start to get on your nerves, I'll go upstairs and learn how to make a video. So we made 136 videos.
Okay.
Um, and about a third of them are related to family law, and about a third on DUI, and the other third on, I think I did mostly workers' comp and some auto stuff. But, those videos are now, goodness, 4 years old. Um, they're very direct because I'm not as sophisticated. I don't have an editing, I didn't want to learn all that. So they're 2 to 3 minutes. Um, you start with an attention grabber, today's videos, features is this.
Right.
And then you have a subject. So you answer a question and then you end with, if you have any other questions, you're welcome to reach out to me, but leave out the ham and cheesy call me and
Right.
they'll hire us. Give them value. It makes a big difference. And even today, some of those videos are getting thousands over time of views, and I get cases. But most importantly, I think it drives some activity to our website. The other thing is you definitely want to get. I use Engage, these live answering. Uh, you know, and the reason I do that is because it will, people like it, first of all. And secondly, um, it puts them on your site for 2 to 3 minutes, sometimes a little longer, which increases your authority scale. So get a website. I would get it custom done. Um, I like vendors that charge by the hour. Because again, when I need you, I'm more than happy to pay. But in terms of some of the larger companies are charging thousands of dollars every single month. They lock you into a 1-year contract, and I say, okay, I get the first month, maybe the second month, but after that, and you get a Wolf of Wall Street, nonsense answer. A
Right.
computer's doing it all, and the AI is doing it all. So I like someone. I've had the same guy. I love him dear, I need him. And I'm not paying for fluff.
Right.
Make sense?
No,
Now,
that
on the AdWords, I'm sorry. On the AdWords, I did, I get a lot of cold calls. Most of them are useless, but some are pretty good. One was a company that did flat rate for Google AdWords because that it definitely works. Okay, but it can be very expensive. You get a $3,000 bill at the end of 1 month. You're going what? But yeah, but that definitely works. But I think getting a good SEO company like yours is money well spent. I'd spend more money on digital than I would on physical overspace and certainly staff. Um, Staff is a luxury. We haven't used a receptionist since we went on our own in 2006, um, because that's just money that a paralegal can take time out of their day to do. But you want to add staff only as you reach the point where you don't want to do what they would be doing,
right.
because you really overhead is critical to any business, and law is a business.
Right. So with your staff one, I really do, we do appreciate you being so generous with your time, and
Of
again,
course,
the information you're providing is invaluable, again, to our audience, and then again to new attorneys who will be listening. So I your statement about staff just brought up another question. Now, in your firm, are you and your attorneys handling the intake, or do you have an intake specialist that handles that as well?
no, no, we are not a mill, and I'll be quite candid. I think intake specialists, they're answering questions, they're giving legal advice. I find that very unethical. And the clients who call me, first of all, they're shocked that I'm answering in the evening, or on the weekends. And it's not that I'm obsessed. I like new calls because you don't know what it's going to be.
Right.
It may be a pair of socks or it may be a GI Joe doll. Um, you just don't know. But it gives you the ability to answer questions. Even if you can't help them, I can usually direct them to somebody who I think can. And a lot of times they just want some simple answers. And if they get an actual lawyer on the phone in the evening, they're going to sleep better that night. So that's huge. That's huge. And they appreciate that. Um, but no, I think for intake, first of all, I love remote work, because they all want to schedule an appointment. That's the old school. And I said, well, I don't do that. If you make me come to the office, I'm going to charge you a consultation fee, or I can talk with you right now for free. And they like that. They get immediate answers. And we're both interviewing. They're interviewing me to see if I'm the lawyer they want, and I'm interviewing them to see if they're the kind of client I want. It has to be a match. But I do my own intakes because I'm the lawyer. I know exactly what I need to know. And I'm answering questions, legal questions, which I think requires a license.
Right.
So, and I do think that you're going to get better clients um, two ways. First, um, if you project on your website that you are a serious attorney, um, you're not standing on top of a semi truck or something, some of these silly things that you see.
Right. Right.
Um, but secondly, I think, clients appreciate the fact that they're talking to me, because let's be honest, if they call my website, um, they probably want to talk to me. Now, my two lawyers that work with me, they're fantastic. They're awesome lawyers. And we promote their brand because, my star is starting to fade, and, they're building their own brand now, and they're fantastic lawyers. So if you want Zach, his contact information is on the website, and you can call him directly. If you want Cody, his information is on the website. So, whoever you want to speak with, you can get to directly. And I think that's very, very important. And it really distinguishes us because if you get nervous, you don't get my answering service. You have to go through my paralegal to get to me. You can get to me directly. And the reason I like that is, and I keep my numbers low, I'd rather have 10 good cases than 100 so-so cases every year. And what I found was, and I never was a mill, but as I raised my prices, as I raised the kind of case I want, my lifestyle improved and my net income, which is the key, stayed the same or improved as well. So if you take, and too many lawyers do this, I tell my younger colleagues, and I tell the lawyers that work with me, never take it where you're burning the midnight oil for two reasons: A, it's not healthy, and B, clients don't respect that. If you're emailing them at 11 o'clock at night, they're going, well, you either got too much business and or you're not working efficiently. So I tell folks, I said, I have no illusions. I'm not 24/7. If you call me after 9 o'clock, you're gonna get a call back the next morning about 7. And the midnight calls, again, that's either $1 million case or $1 million headache. But I will call you back the next morning, probably about 7, and see what it is. And, but I think direct access is very important, and do your own intakes because you're the lawyer, you know what you need to know, and they will respect you more for talking to them directly.
Perfect. Yeah, no, perfect. No, absolutely, absolutely. And again, hope everyone who will be listening, and who is currently listening, really takes that guidance to heart. As we're wrapping up here, um, can if you would like to, if you could just let all of our audience know, how they can learn a little bit more about your firm, the services that you provide, just a little summary, just a little, almost like a plug, just to kind of like, let's wrap up everything so that we can make sure that, your firm is highlighted, the services your firm's highlighted, and how a potential new client can get in touch with you or one of your associates.
For the new lawyers, the other thing I forgot to mention, and this is also, I think, very important, whatever practice area you choose in, first of all, become an expert, whether the bar certifies you or not. You become an expert by absolutely learning everything you can, uh, going to specific CLEs or programs, so that you absolutely know everything about that practice area. And then, and this is the critically important part, write a book, write an ebook, not a pamphlet. And for goodness sakes, don't every other page be a pitch. Write a substantive book, give it a title that catches your attention, put it on your website, um, and absolutely, if you write a book, it's going to give them a lot of information. So by the time they call you, they're going to have a lot of their questions answered. But it gives you, a certain stature. If you wrote a book, you must know something about it. Also, videos are so important. For a while there, we would post videos on our Google Maps, but that got to be just, I don't know, Google kept rejecting everything, and I was talking about nothing but vanilla toast. Um, but a YouTube channel is very, very important, um, because again, it gives them the ability to talk to you, to hear from you. When I say talk to you, that you're having a virtual conversation with them, and they can watch it at midnight on Saturday night if they want to. And so by the time they call you, they're pretty much 9 out of 10 going to hire you because they've already had a conversation in quotes with you. They know your style. They know your level of confidence. They know your particular slant on how to approach a particular kind of case. So by the time they do call you, they're 9/10 ready to go. Um, Advertise your mobile numbers. And when it rings on Saturday night, sometimes I go, what? And my wife always reminds me, could be $1 million case. Um,
Right.
but put limits on your life so that, for example, you don't take calls after say 8 o'clock. Okay. You don't respond to emails at, after 8 o'clock. And an email really doesn't take a whole lot of time and energy. Um, Phone calls, if you have a high drama client, make sure that the value of their case matches the level of engagement. If it does not, you get rid of the case. You get rid of the case. All right. I appreciate the opportunity. I've enjoyed it. I hope I haven't bored everyone to total tears.
Oh, no, no, absolutely not. No, we're very grateful to have you on and providing this experience and this expertise. Um, we would definitely like the opportunity, down the road, maybe to get into a little bit, more specific, areas that we would cover. But I think it's definitely, a very good starting point, especially for potential new clients and newer attorneys with this advice and guidance that you're providing. So we're certainly very appreciative of that. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind one day down the road in a few months,
Sure.
hopping on with us,
Anytime.
yeah,
Happy to do it.
we could certainly provide that. And we're again, thank you very much for hopping on.
Thanks for having me.